Happy Father's Day, everyone. It's really a special day for all the fathers who really are fathers and all the rest of us who have parented. It's like we've all put ourselves, I never had any babies myself, but I've certainly done a lot of parenting. I'm with Mark Hansel, who is my partner. He certainly has parented a few, and like our marquee up there says, even Jesus had two dads. So, so we honor all the fathers, the ones who raised us, the ones who stepped in to continue as needed, and any person who has raised a child should be honored today. My experience growing up, we were unable to figure out what to give our father for Father's Day. You know, it's a really hard job. We got the socks, he got the ties, he got the bathrobes. You know, you guys have probably all of us have been there. He also loved chocolate covered cherries, so that was easy. That was finite. We could get that. But one year, my mother lusted after the Staffordshire dogs, you know, the kind of little Victorian dogs that sit on the mantelpiece. She really wanted them. They were in an antique shop. And I remember this was 1952 and they were $25. Oh my God, she was like, she worked really hard to justify buying those things and she really wanted them. But she figured it out. She wrapped them up and gave them to my father. And he spent the rest of his life joking about, well, what I really want is a pair of Staffordshire dogs. And my nephew Peter Stafford is here. He's not related to the dogs, but I've told him he should ask for them later. I still have them, and they're still on my mantelpiece. And I still enjoy chuckling about my parents who, you know, loved each other dearly. They were odd people in their own ways. They were good, but they were just a little eccentric, and I think that idea to let's just give them to Daddy and that'll make it okay. But I just wonder if he would have preferred to have given a liturgical quilt instead. So that's my Father's Day gift today, is that. It's been a really honor that you guys trusted me to do this. It's a labor of love. It took a lot of time, a lot of research, a lot of advice, a lot of study, a lot of time of reflection. So it took a while. One Sunday I came in. Mark and I have been living in Vermont, but we decided to spend parts of our winter down here. So I thought, oh good, I can come back to my own church. And so I slid in. I was kind of over there, and I got in front of Ruel Nash. I said, where's the quilt? And he said, we don't know. And so this beautiful wall hanging that T. Otis Hinkle had made in around 1978 had been commissioned by this church. Beautiful, beautiful tapestry was gone. And the story was that it was rolled up during storage for Lent during the COVID times, and some people broke in downstairs, and it wasn't missed right away, but they apparently took the quilt. And I think most of the congregation, while they grieved the loss, and probably still do because it was so much a part of us for so long, there was a blank space, and even my wedding pictures had been taken in front of that quilt. Probably all of us have something where that quilt is in the background and we are photographed. So that was something from our past that's fondly remembered, but it's not coming back, and there's little hope of return, and maybe it's doing a good job for somebody else somewhere else. But the blank space made me really sad, and I'm sure the rest of you felt sad. I know Pastor Amelia had put images up. For a while we had one of my quilts that had the tulips hanging there. But it really, we knew that we was going to need a new piece. And then I met Warinda. And Warinda's a force to be recognized with. She says, your name has come up. Your name has come up several times as a person who can do this kind of work. And I said, well, I really hope you find somebody to do that. Like, no. I just shook my head and I said, but good luck on that. And so then we went back to Vermont, and I don't sleep very well, so that's when the boo, starts going on. And why did I do that in 5th grade? That wasn't nice of me, but the person I did it to is dead, so I can't really make amends. So maybe I should make a quilt. Okay. Oh no, I don't want to. And I brooded, and I eventually wrote to Pastor Amelia, and I said, hey, what if I made this piece, and I will offer to do it for free, and it'll take me a while. And so she, of course, had to check with the deacons, as is reasonable to our congregation and our structure. But I was in deep by this time. I was like, oh no, how can I get out of this? But I had a pretty clear vision that I wanted this interior sky with the cross, and then these squares around it that could look kind of like the tiles that sometimes you see in architecture around a door or a window. So that was my first vision of that. And you can also see this around doorways. It could be a doorway or a window, or maybe it's just a cross. But I knew that symbols of faith needed to be the focus for what I felt would work in this church. Wanted it to reflect the art in the windows, and also to reflect what we as a group believe. Not all of us are going to believe every one of these literally, because that's the beauty of being in this denomination, is that we don't always have to agree. But it took me a while to come up with the symbols, and we had a design committee, and they were very helpful in their feedback. So I started assembling materials, and Mark and I came to the church. We measured the area, and by the way, this is going to go up higher, but we couldn't do that this morning, so I'm using the excuse that I could show you if I needed to. I can reach it, but it won't be quite as reachable when we get it up a little higher. But that's going to take the engineering part of this congregation to do this. Whit and John and Mark did a very good job today getting it this far, so we thank them for that. Before I go on too much about how the quilt looks, I wanted to tell you a brief amount about my experience at this church. I grew up in Houston, and my mother and some of her friends, not my mother didn't start it, but she and some of her friends decided that we needed a congregational church in Houston. There was one on the east side of town that was a primarily African American church, but we wanted one on our side of the city. And so that was 1958, and so I've been in that congregational denomination since that time. And it was important to me then, and there was a friend of mine that was going to go to Southwestern University in Georgetown, so her parents invited me to come visit her, so we decided to come here to church. So I was here in 1962 visiting this church once, and I didn't come back. I just thought, what a nice place. And Austin's a nice place. It would be nice to live in Austin. It would be nice to go to that church. But in 1980, I did. So since that time, I've lived here and left and lived here and left. And then when we started spending our winters here, I was able to reconnect. So that was what really spurred me into this. First, I want to tell you that the symbols, or how the symbols are arranged and how they're chosen. There was a Yale intern that was doing his internship at our UCC church up in Grafton, Vermont, across the street from my house. And he's the now pastor, Joshua Sharp. He's finished his master's in divinity. So he came over and we poured a bunch of coffee and got some pencils and papers out and started scribbling. And he helped me come up with kind of this arrangement. I didn't use it all, but I thought it was a very good framework, and then the design committee were happy with that as well, so it worked out. In these corners up here, the bottom, all four sides, those are the tetramorphs, or four forms of the evangelists, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And I found out that the acronym for that is ALOE, A-L-O-E. Angel, lion, ox, eagle. Because each of the evangelists was given an older Christian symbol, which they often appear flanking Christ in majesty and apocalyptic subject. The symbols were, the ones that I used as my reference point were designed around 1490 by an Alsatian artist, Martin Schongauer, and they were black and white engravings. Schongauer may have designed these images for copying in other media, such as stained glass, and that's what I've done, I painted my renditions rather than using Schongauer's line work. And I'm always really concerned about copyright, and anything that was done 100 years or before is safe for all of us to use. I figure that since he did this around 1490, I'm safe. So the first one up here is St. Matthew. Can everybody see which one I'm talking? Top left corner. Okay. Is it on here too? Okay, good. So St. Matthew's symbol shows both the saint and a man and an angel. It's a representation of Matthew as Jesus' incarnation and Jesus' human nature. It also signifies that Christians use their own reasoning for salvation as humans with ability to make decisions. So this is the first Schongauer image. These three across here are my designs, and then filtered through here are some that were digitally printed from stained glass images right here in this church, and then the other ones were painted by me, probably with liberal borrowing of other people's inspiration, but not literally copied or plagiarized. So the first one here is baptism, and the one at the other end here is the communion with Trinity in between. And rituals of baptism and Eucharist are the only two sacraments. Thank you, Whit. I lost that word. They're the only two sacraments that are shared by all Christians everywhere. So those are integral to this church, and in this church, those are the only two sacraments that are regularly performed. I know we have other things like marriage and stuff, but these are the kingpins. So the sacrament of baptism is an outward and visible sign of the grace of God. Through baptism, a person is joined with the universal church and the body of Christ. In baptism, God works in us the power of forgiveness, the renewal of the Spirit, and knowledge of the call to be God's people always. I'll go on to the Trinity symbol. This is the belief that God is three persons. That also the two dads, because it's Father, Son, Holy Ghost, or maybe that's three dads. But these days we often want to refer to them as Creator, Christ, and Holy Spirit, because we are an open and affirming church. They're coexisting with one in how the Trinity doctrine is defined. Communion or Eucharist on the other side. The chalice is midair, pouring wine into a goblet next to a loaf of bread. The UCC definition, United Church of Christ definition, the communion meal recalls the table fellowship Jesus shared with his disciples, and in particular, the Last Supper on the night before his death, as well as his appearance to the disciples during meals followed by resurrection. On the far end is the second of the Schongauer images. This is St. Mark, who's the lion. And he's depicted as a winged lion, which is a figure of courage and monarchy. It also represents Jesus' resurrection. Lions sleep with their eyes open. So, he's watching you. And as Christ the King. This signifies that Christians should be courageous on the path of salvation. It's interesting, too, that the Mark the Lion is King, it's gone into popular culture like horoscope Leo. There's a lot of different images that actually are intertwined or part of the Christian tradition, or maybe they've just picked it up inadvertently. Hard to know. Somebody knows, I just don't. So the categories on this side column here are two of the church holidays. The other two are over there, and then the rest are church windows. So the first one is the UCC symbol, and we have both symbols now. We have the comma down at the bottom, but this one is over here in the church, and this is the symbol of the United Church of Christ, which comprises a crown, a cross, and an orb. I always thought it was a little funny looking, but it helps to really understand what the meaning is. The crown, of course, it refers to majesty, the cross to suffering, and sovereignty, suffering, and then the orb is also divided into three parts: witnessing, moving out into Judea, Jerusalem, and Samaria, thus to the ends of the earth. This refers to our directive to evangelize. So since Jerusalem and Samaria and Judea were the far ends of the earth, it was like, take it out there. So that's what we've put into that older symbol of the United Church of Christ. Nativity, which is down below that, represents Christmas, of course, and Mary, Joseph, and Christ child are all there. And we've all been aware of how many renditions and paintings and art have been done by the Nativity. When I was in Korea, I saw whole stations of the cross where everybody, including Jesus and Mary, they were all Koreans. I was pleased to hear that. So then Lent comes after Christmas, and we have this cross that we use here, and I just tried to do a very literal representation of the cross that we use with the purple drape, because purple or violet are the liturgical colors of the season. and symbolize its repentant character as well as Christ as King of the world, deep, or at least of the spiritual world. Deep purple was a color reserved for royalty in Jesus' time, and the palm leaves are reminder of Jesus' triumphant journey into Jerusalem, and that he will see us through any hardship. And the cross is also the symbol of crucifixion. And there are a lot of other symbols that are part of Lent, and we weren't going to use them all, but there's ashes and other things that represent hardship. The dolphin is pretty fun, and particularly right below Lent, because dolphin was a pagan symbol that Christians took on. He is, as the Christians involved him, he was considered a friend and a deliverer to safer shores of heaven. And then below that is the anchor. And the anchor is the early symbol of safety and navigation. It's a faith, strength, and hope. And it holds us safely in place. Sorry. I just didn't go to divinity school right after I didn't go to medical school, so excuse me. The shape of the anchor is a cross. It's actually a cross. And later, I love this part, it was a symbol on buildings to mark a safe place for Christians to take refuge. So even today, I would imagine that could be something on a woman's shelter or someplace just to say you're safe here. Then we come to St. Luke. Wait a minute. Yeah, St. Luke down at the bottom. He's represented as the winged ox or bull, and this is the symbol of sacrifice, harking back to temple sacrifices of live animals, which fortunately we didn't have to do that after these guys were writing the Gospels. Now we're going to go up to this side, and we've already talked about St. Mark. The next one down is, where is it in this church? Is it over there? Yeah. It's the Star of David with the cross inside it. And we probably don't know exactly what the designers of that had in mind, since these windows are so old. But Britt checked with the Reverend Dr. Jennifer Lord, who's one of her professors, and she says, this is a direct quote I'm reading, "Since Jesus was a Palestinian Jew, and as Christians we believe in God's covenant with the people of Israel, as Gentiles we have been grafted onto the faith tree through Christ. We cannot fully know and understand Jesus and God's mission of love for the world without the Old Testament." And of course, all of us know that we also call our Jewish friends have reminded us that that's their sacred text. So that's what I call the Old Testament. Below that is Easter. Easter lilies surrounded by a bright yellow light, which suggests the pure joy this day as people recognize the risen Christ. The lily is a symbol of purity associated with Virgin Mary. And there are stories of lilies growing where Mary's tears had fallen. There's Jesus' Sermon on the Mount and the quote, "Consider the lilies of the field." And our own tradition of bringing lilies into the church continues the tradition. In Pentecost, I used an image from this dove. There it is over there. I had that printed in velvet in a smaller part for the dove that ascends as the Holy Spirit. And all the followers of Jesus saw at the end of the Lent Mark, what did we call that? The Lent season was the Lent Eastertide. Yeah, Eastertide. Thank you. Yeah, that's what we were trying to figure out. So at the ending of Eastertide, Jesus' spirit descended, and all the people who were watching were saw these tongues of fire down below, and so that was an exciting time that we just finished celebrating a couple of weeks ago. Below that, this fish on the Bible. That's Eucharist, and it's across from the dolphin. I thought, maybe these marine animals needed to. I put the crosses across from each other, and the marine guys together, and angel and the dove. They can both fly. So this is an older symbol for the loaves and the fishes, and it's a symbol of sharing our faith and our resources and our beliefs. Under that is the ascending dove, and you may notice there's 1, 2, and 3. The one here, one in the middle, one down there, and these were intended to represent the Holy Trinity, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, flying down to comfort God's children with hope and love. And that's what this square is a compilation of. Wilderness, which is just below that, Whit came over and gave me a very interesting, helpful explanation of, I was thinking about Jesus in 40 days of reflection in the wilderness, and while he was preparing for his time, considering how his ministry would go, and reflecting on that. And we still go on retreats, and some of those are for reflection. He was also resisting the temptation. He could have, he was told that he could just make some food if he wanted to. After all, he was God. But he said, no, I think I'm going to stick it out and continue my fast. And so that's what he did. At the bottom is St. John. That's the fourth of the Schongauer engravings. As the evangelist, he was the fourth gospel and is depicted as the eagle, often as the other three have, with a halo around his head. Early Christians believed that the eagle could look straight into the sun, and as such, the eagle is farsighted and a vision, and also can see what's immediately present. So eagle's a very nice way to depict that. Across the bottom, you'll see that there's a rainbow, which the earliest Christian symbol of the rainbow involved the separation of heaven and earth. And it's a very old Christian symbol, but we've brought it into modern times, and it's much more associated with gender equality and other kinds of human rights. And I had struggled with how I was going to involve the rainbow in these bottom three, which are human rights kind of issues. And one morning I woke up and I said, why don't you just get it into the front, or into the sky? And so I asked Mark how I was going to do that, and he gave me a couple of ideas, but I ended up buying one of those $30 compasses that can do this. And then I sat down one night, or stood up one night, and I tried to make that, and it turns out to be a 2-person job. So we made the whole thing. It looked like a bullseye, and then we laid it down there, and I cut it off at the right area, and I used the same sparkly kind of material as the sky so that it could just blend in. The first of these is the gender equality. It's an ichthus, with a triangle, and this is something that the UCC has adopted as a gender symbol. And as we proclaim, no matter who you are, no matter where you are in your on life's journey, you are welcome here. During Nazi occupation, people were forced to wear a pink upside-down triangle to identify themselves as homosexuals, or what we now call the LGBTQ population. Originally, this symbol would have had the same reaction as a swastika, but the LGBTQ community decided to embrace it. To surround it with the ichthus strengthens the symbol as Christian. And also, maybe a lot of you know this, but in early times, when Christians were being persecuted, if you wanted to tell somebody that you were Christian, you just stand here and make that sign with your, just draw the ichthus in the dust, and the other person would draw another one, and then they'd walk around and get rid of it. But that says, I follow Christ, and the other person says, I do too, and then they're safe. In my AA community, we say, are you a friend of Bill's? And people who know that Bill Wilson was the founder of AA say, yeah, I know Bill. He's a good friend of mine too. And the rest of us said, Bill who? Oh no, I've never heard of him. So it's like a little code, and now all of you know my secret, okay? The middle is racial justice, and I just made hands in different colors of flesh tones. I got that flesh-toned felt from the Waldorf School online store, and it came with, I think it was something like 15 or 20 different tones, so that it went from this very darkest one to the very lightest one without almost any kind of gradation. It was just very smooth. And so Mark and I tried to pick the 4 that would make the most visual impact and kind of be the most inclusive. So that's what that's for, is a racial justice. I think it can also be considered disabilities, because we're holding everybody up. And everybody, if all of us are God's children, then we all need to be held up, and all of us are going to do that. The comma down here, this will be fun for all my guests who came in today who are not that conversant in UCC language. The quote was from the comedian Gracie Allen, and she said, never place a period where God has placed a comma. And it just means that means to most of us that God's not, he's still talking, he's still got more to say to us, and we've got more to learn. So, as I've gotten older, I've become a little bit more stubborn or more opinionated or something. That's it. That's how it is. And no, we need to lighten up and use that metaphorical comma in our thoughts. Not every UCC member has been happy with this change, and I get it. But that was one of the reasons why I wanted to put them both in, because I think they're both really strong symbols. And we've already talked about St. John, so now we can go to the center panels. Not everyone in this congregation or in this faith is really comfortable with a great big cross. So I wanted to make the cross important, significant, and subtle. So we got this wood-grained fabric, and it's not so different from the way these pieces of wood hold the other things in place. And that was an important idea, that, that they could be a window, it could be a door, or it can be a cross. It's kind of up to you. Cross is pain and suffering. The chaos in the background, Dr. Bodman, Reverend Dr. Bodman, our friend Whit, suggested to me, and I love this, that the blue in the middle is chaos. And the way I made it was tiny little pieces of fabric, and I put them down, not quite randomly, but sort of. And then there's a washable film that I can put over it all, sew through all of it, wash it. The solvable film goes away, and it frays all those little pieces so that they start to melt together. And I've embedded some little doves, and there's the Lord's Prayer, and a few other things are embedded in there, and those little bits of sunshine. And the idea is that it's joy in amongst this chaos. I think it's important as we think about how this church feels right now. We are in chaos. We know that. Things are in transition. We don't know what to do. We're working on it, but we haven't figured out how this building is going to move forth. Who's going to be here? Who are we going to serve? All of those things. But we have a hopeful piece here that says there can be beauty in the chaos, and maybe we could just treat it as little rains, but beams of sunshine, and stop worrying so much about the chaos. I chose colors that would work with the rest of the pieces in the church, and I used this starry fabric in the purple. But these paintings, like right here, I used white fabric that had white on white stars. So everything that I painted had some sort of a shadowy star image in the back, which I thought was suitable for who we are and what we do. There was a lot of fabric left over, so I cut it into strips because I thought it would be really nice to have the colors of this go on our prayer net over here, just to give it a little bit of cohesiveness. And of course we packed them and sent them to Vermont, so I send them back down here when I find them. So where's my last page? So here we are. We're a church body. We are old and we're new, and we come together, and we come in very different ways. There's a difference in race, gender, belief, personal taste, physical abilities, and all that in between. We've surrounded ourselves with a variety of these symbols of spirit. As we go about in our daily lives, we have many paths. It's wonderful that we come back together and celebrate as a magnificent group. We will always miss our older quilt. I hope this one sustains us as we go forward on a new quest, changing with the times, but never forgetting our roots. Thank you.